Okie doke. Third topic from the data interpretation module, growth and poverty. And here we're looking at Naomi Klein and Banerjee and Duflo. Naomi Klein is left-wing activist and author, Canadian, probably still best known for her debut book No Logo from 2001, which again is available to read online here. So I'm again giving you a couple of quotes. Page 122 of the print version, and next slide, page 206. But this version online, you need to go to page 137 and 213. The economic trends that have so accelerated in the past decade have all been about massive redistribution and stratification of the world's resources, of jobs, goods, and money. Everyone except those in the very highest tier of the corporate elite is getting less. Okay. Is that true? Well, we'll talk about it next Friday. Here's another quote. This is the one from 206 in the print version, 213 in the online. And this is about export processing zones, EPZs, and in particular an export processing zone that Naomi Klein visited in the Philippines. Okay. The export processing zones are built upon is the promise of industrialization. The theory behind EPZs is that they will attract foreign investors who, if all goes well, will decide to stay in the country, and the zone's segregated assembly lines will turn into lasting development, technology transfers, and domestic industries. To lure the swallows into this clever trap, the governments of poor countries offer tax breaks, lax regulations, and the services of a military willing and able to crush labor unrest. To sweeten the pot further, they put their own people on the auction block, falling over each other to offer up the lowest minimum wage, allowing workers to be paid less than the real cost of living. Okay, so this sounds pretty terrible, right? But most of us probably haven't been to the Philippines. I actually have a colleague who comes from the Philippines, and I hope soon to have another one who will come from the Philippines. So maybe I could talk to them about this EPZ or the EPZs in the Philippines. But so it's hard to know quite what to make of this. But we can look at some data, and I'd like you, those of you working on this topic, have a look at some data around the Philippines. What's happened to GDP per capita in the Philippines in the last 30 years? So this was written in the round about 2000, right? The book came out, if I remember rightly, 2001. So what's happened to GDP per capita? What's happened to the other welfare indicators in the Philippines? Who's benefited, assuming that GDP per capita has gone up, which I guess it has? Who's benefited from that? Okay, I got a warning, I got a meeting. Sorry, I got to check my diary. Okay, all good. So that's Klein and the Philippines. What about Banerjee and Duflo? Okay, Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo, another married couple. We got a lot of couples here, but here there's no doubt about attribution. They worked together and they received the Nobel Prize in Economics together for their experimental approach to alleviating global poverty, along with Michael Kramer, by the way, who we mentioned earlier. In 2011, they published Poor Economics, a radical rethinking of the way to fight global poverty, which represents their views on development economics for a general readership. Let's have a look at a quote or two quotes from that book. And I have got a link to that right here. Poor Economics, page 416. A study of the height of Mexican children whose mothers worked in maquiladoras or something. I'm not very good on Spanish, I'm afraid. Export factories in Mexico dramatically illustrates the power of a good job. Maquiladoras generally have the reputation of being exploitative and paying poor wages. However, for many women without a high school education, the establishment of the maquiladoras offers the prospect of a better job than the jobs in retail, food services, or transportation that would otherwise be their lot. The hourly wages are not much higher, but they work longer hours and with more regularity. A bit later, David Atkin from Yale University compared the height of children born to mothers who lived in a town where a maquiladora opened when the woman was 16 years old to that of children of mothers who did not have this opportunity. The children whose mother's town had a maquiladora were much taller than those born to similar women in different towns. This effect is so large that it can bridge the entire gap in height between a poor Mexican child and the norm for a well-fed American child. Okay, so this is a very different view on these sort of export-oriented factories, right, compared to Klein. Banerjee and Duflo's book, like Klein's, is full of anecdotes. Is there a difference? Leading question, of course, I claim that there is, but what is the difference? Banerjee and Duflo argue that microcredit, setting up systems to allow very poor people access to small amounts of credit, is good as far as it goes, but the effects are typically very limited. Can you link this to our model of technological change and growth? So microcredit is a typical way, you would argue, for people to help people lift themselves out of poverty. It's like, if you like, it's a sort of alternative to these export zones or these export orientated production factories. Banerjee and Duflo seem to claim that the arguments between the left wing, help people, and the right wing, let the market work its magic, can be resolved at the micro level. Does giving away anti-mosquito bed nets work? We can answer that question, but it can't be resolved at the macro level. Does foreign aid work? What do you think? Do you agree? Okay, there's some questions to think about. Yeah, and that was the end of that one. So, topic, growth and poverty. Klein is arguing strongly against globalization, export orientation. Banerjee and Duflo seem to be arguing for it in at least this part of their book, and also arguing that the sort of organic, the ways of just helping people to help themselves through things like microcredit, not very effective. Okay. So I want you to, those of you who have this topic, I want you to go in depth into those kinds of questions. And that's the end of that video. Next one, planetary systems.